All right, great. So thank you everyone so much for your time. It's so great to see so many of you from all over here. My name is Lauren Jack. I head up the SS&C Learning Institute. SS&C is just a little bit of background. We're a large tech company. We service over 18,000 clients across different industries. And my business unit, the Learning Institute, we work with those clients in developing professional education and training programs for everything from annual compliance programs to CE programs. So we work a lot with TCC because sometimes we'll have a client come to us and ask for a very niche subject coverage. And so I've been invited today to share with you some of the best practices our production team follows when we're designing and developing various e-learning programs. So first of all, for all of those of us that are trainers and have been L&D for a while now, we've all found ourselves busier than ever over the last couple of years with the need to shift in-person programs virtual, whether that's VILT or e-learning. E-learning ended up coming to the rescue, providing quick solutions for teams, to educate their workforce remotely, make sure they could still meet regulatory requirements. So we're all pretty familiar with all the benefits of e-learning, right? It saves time, money, travel. It's convenient. Learners can take it anywhere, anytime. Takes 40 to 60% less time than classroom instruction. It's great for a range of topics, suitable for a remote audience, traveling, or even high turnover population, and very flexible solutions. So learners can pause, reread, test out of content. So we're all familiar with all the great benefits of e-learning. One thing I want to talk about on the outset is just some drawbacks that are rarely discussed. But I think it's important to recognize them and discuss them so that we can work together as an industry to fix them. So first off is that e-learning has a bad rep. When employees hear a new program is released, they don't typically get excited. You may even hear groans as they think of mandatory compliance programs. Content is often written generically so as to appeal to a wider audience, but as a result can resonate with less. And then once a program is developed, such as, for example, an annual compliance program, it's typically recycled year after year for efficiency and to tick a box, and doesn't get updated as frequently as new programs take priority. So all these points kind of collectively contribute to a wider issue, which is that, yes, e-learning has all these great benefits, particularly for administrators and more convenience for learners, but at the same time, there's still this kind of sticky perception that the good news is we as L&D professionals can start to tackle. So what I'm going to cover today, we're going to walk just through some best practices when it comes to the UI UX of e-learning programs, content development, annual program planning, and communication strategy. So I'm just going to jump right on in to the UI UX. This sample here I have on the screen probably looks familiar to some of you. It is where e-learning programs started. They were designed for administrators, by administrators, with limited tools at the time. So you'll see you have this traditional real estate of 5 by 4 inches on screen, which doesn't scale, which is why you have this white space around. The navigation is on the bottom, which can be cut off when you're using a smaller screen. Text heavy with bullets. This sample did have voiceover audio, but it was locked down, which we all know is a painful experience for learners that know the content well. And we all read faster than we can talk. So, and then also the menu's not even available on this. It's a forced linear experience. So this is where a lot of programs started, with the tools available at the time and with the topics of typically compliance. A few years later, we start to see some more interaction come through. So here on this sample, folks were able to click on these different characters to get their perspective. You have a video option up top. You can see a little progress bar. There's audio on the bottom, but you'll still see the menu's not available to explore. We've got white space happening on screen, which means different users, depending on their screen, are having a different experience. We still see this next and back button, which just is not a very natural way of navigating for a lot of people. I mean, where else do you see next and back buttons other than e-learning programs? When I go to look up something online and I'm reading an article, I'm scrolling. So this is what now we're starting to see. We're seeing a lot of new tools come through, including rapid development tools that are enabling the scrolling navigation. They have a vertical side menu that's always visible, that can be easily collapsed, that has progress indicators where folks can hop in and out of topics they want to view. We're even seeing these tools are now including advanced features, such as the ability to create games without coding. So really starting to shift to the actual end learner experience. Yes, you're ticking the box. Yes, you're getting all the reporting you need. Yes, it's easy for administrators to be creating, but the focus is now shifting, and we're really working, especially for compliance programs, which I use as an example today because many of us have experience with them, to behavioral change, to evoking emotion, engagement, and putting forth an experience that's really going to start to delight learners. When they open it up, they're thinking in their head of that first compliance program you saw, and then when they see this experience, it starts to erode at that negative perception that they might still have. So many new tools out there. I'm not going to go through naming a whole list, but I encourage, really checking out different types of tools that enable these UI, UX improvements that we're starting to see, which is really exciting. Next piece I want to jump into, content development. This is what ends up taking most amount of time for folks creating a new program. So when you're pulling an e-learning program together, whether you're rolling out a brand new program or you're refreshing an existing course, I just want to cover some great little content treatments to consider including. So senior endorsement, opening up a program. It could be an annual code of conduct program with a video from senior management, maybe the CCO, speaking to the importance of the program that's going to follow, why employees should pay attention, really adds credibility, and it immediately engages learners from the outset. It gets them to sit up a little straighter in their seats. It tells them senior management is behind this program, but it also signals to them this program is up to date and it's relevant to my company and my role at the company. So when you're signaling that content is up to date and relevant to the employee, it really increases engagement. If it was an anti-money laundering course, for example, this might look like opening the course with breaking news, with the latest articles on, fines for non-compliance. But when you show that this is up to date and it's going to have the latest and greatest going on in a topic, it really piques their curiosity and gets them to kind of listen a little bit closer and engage, which is great. Speaking of engaging, of course, we all love interactivities. So moving from a more passive text-based or video-based, sometimes we forget video is passive. So moving away from that to interactivities really is where you're going to get that translation to knowledge retention. And tools nowadays, they include the ability to easily add, sorting, matching, labeling, multiple choice, multiple select, crossword puzzles for key terms. So you definitely want to start including more interactions, but not only that, you want to mix it up. So as they're going through, they're having a fresh experience. They're having, those, synapses are firing. They're having to, work through different sorts of problems in order to kind of get to where they need to go throughout that experience. Then key takeaways. So this is a really great best practice to develop nicely designed key takeaways. Could be a checklist, a cheat sheet, glossary of terms, policy documents, because this allows you to extend the impact of the training beyond them exiting that browser window. They'll have documentation that they can reference going forward in their day-to-day. And then test out option. This is something that is really growing in popularity. At first, it was a little controversial. People didn't want to touch it, but now we're seeing it included in every single program we're creating. So it benefits both the organization and the learner, because learners are able to demonstrate their knowledge of a topic and then benefit from it. Whereas the organization is able to get that peace of mind that, okay, a particular employee knows that topic. They don't need to spend that time going through the full training. So cost effective, efficient, and it really helps to ameliorate that training fatigue that we're starting to hear a lot about lately. So these are just some different pieces that you can start to include in different programs and hopefully start to elevate the employee experience as they're going through all the different e-learning programs they're rolling out. So
hey,
yes, Bob?
Lauren, yeah, quick question just came in about development. Let me get this up so I can read this, but about the process itself. So this can take, really cool stuff that you're talking about. Sometimes this can take a long time to complete, in some cases multiple months. Do you have any recommendations on sort of how you would streamline the process to develop new content, add some of these interactivities, but in some sort of streamlined way? Do you have any recommendations?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say number one would be tool. So the tool that you choose is really going to dictate the development time frame. So for example, there's some rapid development tools out there, like Articulate 360 has the Rise tool. And this allows SMEs to even edit. So you're no longer having to go through storyboard. You're able to kind of truncate the development process, remove storyboard, empower your SMEs through those types of tools that they can use, which are simple, no more coding required. So that's something that if we have a tight timeline come through from a client, we will suggest a rapid development tool, and we will get the SME using that directly so that it's a lot more of a streamlined process. But the other thing, which will depend on your own internal team, that we've started doing is cross-training. So, the traditional roles within a production team, you have your graphic designer, you have your instructional designer, you have your developer. They're all in their silos. They know what they do. And it goes through the process, goes to each of them at each round of review. What we're starting to do is we have a fabulous developer that had a knack for design, but wasn't formally trained. We formally trained her. So now instead of having to go to two different individuals and there's that back and forth, we're cross-training resources so that when they're developing something, they're looking at it with a design perspective as well. So that's also helping us. But yeah, I would say rapid tools and cross-training within a production team really help us to pick up that pace, because there's no reason that you should still have to do the traditional development process where there is storyboarding for review, because these rapid development tools have built-in collaboration tools to review. So it's definitely an exciting time, and definitely ways that you can reduce that time frame.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, absolutely. So next thing I want to talk about is a little bit about just program planning. So when you start working on the first e-learning deliverable at the start of a new year, it's easy to get caught up in what the business needs and getting the ball rolling on scheduling and development. But it's important to take the time to step back to review the whole year as a calendar and see all the different needs and all the different programs that you're going to be launching, because it's going to allow you to start staggering communications. Because what we want to avoid is just bombarding employees with communications at the end of the year or a compliance deadline. We want to be staggering communications throughout the year. So really thinking about timing of launches. And then also looking at the different programs and seeing, okay, not all content suits a full course and a full test. There's so many different types of content that you can create, articles, videos, podcasts, e-learning micro lessons. And then there are the full courses, tests, and assessments. So when you're reviewing all the programs throughout the year, starting to think about mixing up, playing with the durations, playing with the content types, creating a more robust overall annual calendar, and starting to think about, keeping things top of mind throughout the year, but not, putting too much of a burden at one time where they have to complete, like, for example, new hires. This is just notorious. They join and they've got to spend 6 hours going through all their training. How can we start to stagger that to get rid of that training fatigue that we're hearing a lot about? And then another thing that I wanted to just kind of insert in here for you today is that, at the Learning Institute, we have the privilege to work with all sort of organizations on a variety of topics, which means we also get a really great bird's eye view of the performance of all these programs, and we start to see patterns emerge. So I've listed the few biggest drivers of usage that we're seeing across our clients for you to just keep in mind as you're planning your own program development. So first off, no surprise here, CPE credits. So most employees have to maintain their own professional designations personally out of their own pockets, whether they're a CPA or a CIMA or a CFP. So if you're offering your employees programs that include CPE credits that they can then use, it's a huge driver of usage, and they really appreciate that their organization is supporting them in that way. Learning paths. So most learning management systems contain hundreds, if not thousands, of resources for employees to take advantage of. And, as L&D, we're thinking, oh, we're doing so great because they have all this amazing resources that they could take advantage of. But the reality is, especially for a new hire, when they're first logging in and seeing that, it's overwhelming. It's daunting. They don't know where to start. They don't know what's important for their role. So curating learning paths, whether it's by department, by role, by region, it really helps them to get, to navigate through the learning management system, just start dipping their toe into some of the content. And then that's when you'll start getting them coming back. So if we see a learning path, by different role or different departments, it also really encourages internal mobility and retention so that they can say, oh, if I want to start moving into this area, maybe I should start taking some of this content. So really encouraging discovery and exploration within the learning management system. Hot topics. This one, I can't say enough, when you're offering programs on the latest topics in the industry, we always see a huge spike in usage. So we as an organization, we aim to release new topics on a monthly basis. But I could tell you when we released our most recent course on ESG investing, a wave of usage across all our clients went up. Same thing happened when we released blockchain and digital assets. So kind of keeping your finger on the pulse on just in the industry in general, what are the latest topics going on? In health, we're doing one on interoperability and, releasing something very timely, even if it's short and sweet. It doesn't have to be, you don't want to be taking a few months to create something new because by then it's not new. So even if you have a short and sweet intro video to what is ESG or whatever the topic may be, you start to see people going in because that curiosity is being satisfied, which is great. And then reminder emails. So keeping the offering top of mind, whether it's providing links, providing logins is another huge driver. So I'm not talking about the reminder emails that you're probably thinking of that are all text with high priority that says deadline coming up. I'm talking, a beautifully designed email that's coming out saying, don't forget, you have all these great things available and here are your CPE credits you can get, and, kind of taking it from that perspective. So when we see a program that includes all these elements, it's on a hot topic, it's included in a learning path, it's got CPE credits, and there's emails being sent out, it's a no-brainer that this is what's really helping us to get that usage, which is really great to see, and then translates to positive feedback on the other end.
Lauren, can I jump in with a personal question? You piqued my interest.
Yes, please.
This is not coming from a participant, an audience member. You talked about quick and timely and hot topics. I like that. And in the prior slide, you used a terminology that sounds self-explanatory, but maybe plays into that. A micro module.
Yes.
Micro set. Timing. When you talk about a micro module, what are you thinking, if I may ask?
Sure. So micro learning, it can be, a video, which we would consider less than 3 minutes, an article on a topic, which we would put in around 5 minutes, and then, from videos to articles, you can have podcasts, which would be a few minutes. You can have a micro learning lesson, which is typically a smaller e-learning course that has some interactivity, but it's no more than 7 to 10 minutes. And then instead of like the full-blown tests or assessments, that would be a quiz that would be no more than 5 questions. So it's curating these smaller pieces that are typically more introductory, and then including them in different learning paths and having that, be kind of the short and sweet experience that they can go through to satisfy their curiosity on a topic, if that makes sense.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So the next piece I wanted to talk about, just speaking of emails and communicating, is, how we're speaking to our audience. So historically, when L&D or HR is communicating to employees about e-learning, it's a text-based email with a high priority that a compliance deadline is approaching, perhaps. I feel we need to change the way in which we're communicating with employees, because this is one of the easiest ways we can have to influence their perception of our programs. So rather than communicating to employees as if they are our colleagues, which technically they are, L&D can start communicating to them as if they're clients, because L&D's clients are our employees. So if you look at how an organization is communicating externally to its clients, you see these beautifully branded LinkedIn posts, you see emails, you see downloadable documents, the website, it's all beautifully branded. But then if you look at the emails that L&D or communications or materials L&D is providing to employees, that level of polish sometimes isn't there. And so how do you do this? So developing a brand. So say you have a new program coming out, and you can create a slogan, create it almost as if it's a marketing campaign. You develop a brand for a program. You then apply that visual aesthetic to, like you could see here, we have a brochure, we have a e-learning program, we have the interactions. Everything's custom designed to this particular client's branding palette, as if they were a client looking at our website. Applying that same brand to the email communications, applying it to any collateral. If a new hire joins, instead of just sending them an email with links to the different courses they need to take, you're sending them a beautifully designed email with a welcome packet attached that has FAQs. Once they then go through to the learning management system, they're experiencing all these branded programs. And then on top of that, if you can, take it one step further and start doing video promotion. This is something that we see completely changes the communication strategy for these programs, because think of it, you have all these different platforms that employees are accessing internally, and there is real estate on there to be popping up videos. So say you have a video, and it can be something very simple, 60 seconds long, royalty-free background video, royalty-free background music, which is text animated on screen. It takes an hour to create in some rapid tools. And it could be talking about a new course that's coming out. One thing we love to do is trivia. So for example, if a new compliance course is coming out on AML, everyone thinks they know AML inside and out. But we created a video recently for our client that started off saying, okay, which of the following banks received the largest fine for AML violations last year? And then you see the different names of banks come up, and then animated is the answer. And it says at the end, if you didn't know this, check out the latest course because there's something new for you to learn, so kind of piquing their interest and engaging with them in video format, and then linking through videos on different platforms to the LMS, because the less clicks it takes someone to get there, the more easy it is for them to get there. So, so these are just different ways to start communicating, shifting from thinking of, oh, we're helping out our colleagues by providing them with resources, to we are marketing to our clients, which are our employees, to help them to understand all the resources that are available to them, get that awareness up, and get that usage up. So,
and Lauren, just a quick question. You mentioned using some royalty-free video or sound. So are you talking about open sourcing that? So from the internet?
Great sites out there right now, like Pexels, P-E-X-E-L-S, Pixabay, and they allow you to download videos for free. And you can just search for a term, and some may come up. If you have a Shutterstock license or iStock license, even better. But because it is for an internal audience, you have a little bit more freedom in the types of resources that you can pull. So if you choose to download those free videos, and then you can just pop them in a video, and it just really elevates the experience, because instead of just text and animated imagery on screen, which is what you typically see, you've got this Bitcoin video we did had Bitcoins dropping from the sky as the text is animating on screen, and it just really has this production quality that in reality it's really quick and cheap, but it comes across as, oh wow, this is polished.
That's what I was just going to say, so that you can get quite the impact for not a whole lot of money, that this is really something that's an easy way to enhance communication in a cost-effective way.
And that's our goal, because L&D, our budgets, even though we're more and more busy, our budgets, are always never enough. So trying to make every buck stretch as far as we can, and think about how we can get creative and with cost-effective, efficient solutions to be putting something out there that looks really polished, that has the brand, but in reality, we're able to do ourselves rather than outsourcing.
Great.
So hopefully we got your creative juices flowing a little bit when it comes to ways L&D professionals can start to tweak the way we're designing and developing programs and communicating them to our audiences. There are so many wonderful rapid development tools out there. I mentioned Articulate, Beyond is great for video, that can really elevate the employee experience. And hopefully as an industry, we can start to come together to take advantage of these tools and techniques and start developing programs and delivering them to delight our audiences and start to change the perception. So hopefully one day when we start saying new e-learning programs are available, people will get excited and jump in them, thinking they'll be able to complete their CPE, thinking they'll be able to learn something new. So, so that's what I had to share with everyone today. So with that, I will hand it back over to you, Bob. Thank you so much. Oh. Is anyone else having trouble hearing Bob? I don't know if it's my computer.
Okay, there we go.
Oh,
okay,
there we go.
Sorry. I was muted my my microphone, so I apologize. All right, so thanks, Lauren, for that. That was terrific. I really appreciate you doing that and jumping in there and as I was getting disconnected. But with that, I'm going to start sharing screens and really allow Bill Addiss to properly introduce himself with his background, but then also get into a little bit of a conversation about engagement in virtual instructor-led training. So now we've talked about asynchronous e-learning. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some synchronous learning with that is instructor-led. So with that, I'm going to start sharing screens. So there's our share. So hopefully we're looking at Bill's background. Bill, if you want to just take over and introduce yourself, and then we'll get into to rapport building and engagement.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And I appreciate the opportunity for this and the whole group. But yeah, to introduce myself. I've been working with Bob and Expert for about 4 years now. And the reason I'm in the training field to begin with is because my first 30 years in the business, I spent at a firm called Lehman Brothers. I resigned from Lehman in 2006, which means I beat everyone out the door by 2 years. But when I resigned, I was a managing director in the capital markets area. I spent most of my life as a bond trader. I also managed a division for Lehman. But in 2006, I decided it was time for a career change. So I left Lehman to create my own international capital markets training firm. And that's what I've been doing, pardon me, since 2006. And I've had the opportunity to join up with Bob, as I said, about 4 years ago. And what I think I bring to the table is real life application. But what I think I really bring to the table is I absolutely love the classroom experience. That's what drove me to training, to take the knowledge I learned of 30 years in the markets and be able to share it with others. And I love the classroom experience. Now, obviously, when we all got forced into a virtual world 2 years ago, my world, like everyone else's world, changed. And moving on to the various technologies we have, I have to be perfectly honest and confess. On the one hand, I am so grateful that we have this technology as a backup during this pandemic time. And it's offered certain opportunities. But when it comes to the topic of engagement, getting the people taking the classes to be as vested, I think, unfortunately, this medium sacrifices something to the original classroom experience. I very much am looking forward to getting back, although this is our life going forward. But we also have the opportunity of 2 years worth of experience now to get our own best practices. And that's what I was asked to share with you all is on the topic of getting the people in the room engaged. What are some of the clues? What are some of the tips? What have we learned over this 2-year period? And first, let me say, almost irrespective of whatever platform you might be using, I do think that there are tools in there that are real relationship builders. And I'm thinking specifically like meeting rooms or breakout rooms, the opportunity that they can work amongst themselves in smaller groups. You know, it breaks down some resistance. So I do like those. I think knowledge checks along the way, forcing them to put hands on keyboard and answer a question. And it also is a tool, obviously, for management to use. But the real issue is, for me, is to get the dialogue going, to create an environment where they feel comfortable to ask questions. Now, working from a top down, it's obvious, but whatever we can technologically support, given whatever client you're working with or the platform you're working for, we should encourage it all. Meaning, if you can get cameras on everybody in the room and have them do it, if the group is big enough, you have broadband, do it. If we can give microphone capability to everyone, I personally recommend that. If we can have chat function for everyone. In other words, systemically, we want to provide every opportunity we can to get them to engage in the medium they feel comfortable with. Now, again, based on the size of the group, the wishes of the client, that's not always possible, but we want to encourage it as much as possible. And you know, when we start with those tools, and I will never forget, I had a client, as soon as we went onto this virtual world, they wanted a poll every 10 minutes. Literally in the RFP, they wanted a poll every 10 minutes. And my frustration was, once I start facilitating, is I think a poll is can be an effective icebreaker. Let's get an opinion. Let's get people talking. My problem is that if we're doing a good enough job of engaging them already, I've actually seen the polls become a distraction. You know, let me break from this engagement we're having. Let me break from this dialogue to now go to the next slide where you're going to be asked to answer a poll. We already had a good dialogue going. So I'm not a big fan of polls, but I am a fan of engagement. So how do we do it? First off, you have to be approachable, right? For anybody to reach out to you in a class to ask a question or in any way to engage with you, they have to feel comfortable, which literally means we have to be approachable. Now, that starts in every presentation you see, says, you know, start with a smile, be approachable. But there's a lot more to it than that. And let me say to you, I think the most valuable part of a program for me as a trainer is the first 15 or 10 minutes before the class starts. If I can have the opportunity to engage in banter with the participants in the class, because it's been interesting to me, to get them to start hitting the keyboard or pick up the microphone even prior to the class starting, you're already starting to break down that resistance. So something like even asking the people in the room, while we're getting together, while we're waiting for people to get settled, you're getting your cup of coffee, where are you calling in from? Where are you dialing in from? Give me your location. And what I'm really doing is they're feeding me information that I can then start developing a rapport. I know my content. So if there's something relative to a geography where they are, I can now bring them in and incorporate it. Hey, you're calling us from London. The Bank of England did this today on their bank lending rates, and I can already start engaging them as much as possible. Even for a US domestic group, you know, I did a program in Denver last night, and I asked where people were calling in from, because you can't make the assumption they're all from Denver anymore, right? This was a Denver-based firm, yet the participants, employees calling in were from all over the US. So I really think that this 15 minutes that you, or any time you can spend in the banter, for lack of a better word, and this also was something that I have to confess didn't come from me. This actually came from my video producer, because my video producer pointed out that whenever I did have something in common with somebody in the bantering or just the talk in beforehand, that person was almost always the first or second to be willing to jump in with a question. And with that observation, which was her observation, not mine, we kind of found we could manipulate that process. By then engaging and reaching out to them in that banter, they then become more comfortable. So I encourage you. The other aspect is, you know, we all remember, but, you know, I grew up in the age of Jim Henson and the Muppets. The only thing that's important is what happens within, you know, this 14 inches that you're looking at. And you have to make the most use of those 14 inches. You've got to do things visually to engage. And Bob's laughing because he's seeing my hand gestures. I'm famous for my hand gestures. You know, when I'm talking about the yield curve, I do a lot of capital markets and interest rate training. When I'm talking about the yield curve, it becomes a visualization. And I'm self-deprecating, and I do it intentionally. I've got as much ego as anybody else, but in the room, I want to be as self-deprecating as possible to encourage that engagement. I mean, I even have sections that I get way too animated on, that I enjoy too much, and I know my voice gets loud or excited. And on the one hand, I think they appreciate that change in tone, that, you know, I'm getting excited about something like the Federal Reserve, but I'll even finally get to the point where I'll be, you know, I have to take a deep breath here. I can hear myself. I'm getting way too excited about this. And I'll be self-deprecating in the acknowledgement that, you know, I have to do a better job for them and slow down. So anything you can do along that way without sacrificing your credibility. And you know, you certainly never want to get to the point. And the last one I'll mention is even the use of props. You know, I have been known every once in a while to pull an old-fashioned pen out of my pocket and illustrate changes in the yield curve by something as simple as that. But the mere fact you're doing something out of the mold, it raises attention. And I'll even joke about it. You know, here I am with my high-tech props. And I make it look spontaneous. The truth is the pen's always there because I know I'm going to need it. It's pre-planned. But so again, anything you can do in terms of animated expressions, hand gestures. I'm not saying you want to go over the top and become the next Jim Cramer, Mad Money, bells. Professionalism is key here. Let's keep that on top. But I do think that you have to put yourself out there. That's really the reality. And again, to validate my point, when I have people in the room who don't seem like they're connected, during the breaks, I'll try and get some way to reach out to them. Even to the point of, I haven't heard from you. I want to make sure you're all right. I just want to check in. So I use the breaks quite often to reach out on text, just one-to-one, just checking in with them. And then the last thing I'd like to point out, and this is, I don't know if there's such a thing as controversial on this topic, but like in the classroom experience, what I'm really trying to do virtually is to mimic as much as possible the classroom experience. Well, in the classroom, if I have a quiet group, I have no qualms at all about calling on people. John in the back of the room, I haven't heard from you all. What do you think about this? And personally, I have taken that over into my virtual experience. And I tell people right up front in my sessions that don't be surprised if I call on people again. And I stress, this is not in any way punitive. This is in no way meant as a punitive measure. But just like in a classroom, if we have a quiet group, we're going to reach out. I don't have any less of an expectation for that here in the virtual world. You're assumed to be tuned in just as much. Now, again, you got to be, in my mind, you have to be real careful about not sounding punitive in any way, shape, or form. And the other thing is, I will admit, some organizations have problems with that. They for whatever reason, they do feel that maybe it could be used on a punitive. So I've had it work both for and against me, not in the room itself, but in working with the clients as they feel comfortable with be doing that as a tool. I advocate it, and I think I'm showing that I'm trying to do everything I can to mimic the classroom experience and get as much interactivity as possible. That's kind of what I had.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate that. It's interesting talking about the interactivity and calling on people. One of the techniques that I found to be super useful is sort of building off of your rapport building comments and having the ability to talk to people before the program starts. But even once the program started, if I assign them a task or an exercise, put them in breakout rooms and have them do it, and then I typically am bouncing in and out of the breakout rooms just to see how they're doing, making sure everything's going along. And when I find somebody that's got a particularly clever response and answer, I prep them by telling them, hey, that's really cool. I'm going to ask you to share that with the class. So it avoids the whole punitive concept of, hey, I'm calling on Jane to address this question. But she's empowered to know that, think very highly of her response and really want to create the opportunity for her to share that response and be a leader in the class. So I found that technique to be super helpful, and also gets basically the class teaching back and forth amongst themselves, obviously with the guidance that we're providing as experts. But instead of listening to you or me for hours on end, they're listening to their peers and encouraging that sort of engagement.
And I might, even following up on that, work those breakouts early in the program so that they can start building that rapport right away. Absolutely. The breakout rooms can be a good team building exercise. They'll work with themselves when they might not be comfortable in the larger group. I did see we had a question from Dr. Williams. Great question, sir. And sorry it took so long to get back to your question. Yeah, this is a bit of a dancing act you have to do. Again, when you call on people and they're not engaging, the reality is they could be away. And I try not to, again, sound punitive. I'll just say maybe they're multitasking, they're busy with something else, but I will give it 2 or 3 minutes most to ask somebody a question and see if they want to respond. What you'll also find, though, is that others in the room will help you out if you've built that rapport. Quite often I'll call on somebody, I'll ask a question, they maybe are tuned out or not there, dead silence, and other people in the room will jump in. And I'll usually open it up to the group, saying maybe I shouldn't put Joe on the spot, let's open it up to the whole group. But I want to give them the opportunity to engage first. Great question, sir.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Dr. Zach. All right, I'm going to just share screens again and talk a little bit about the virtual environment that we try to create. So with that, let me share my screen again. Okay, so we should be looking at virtual instructor-led training, or VILT, as we refer to it. So a couple things. So if you guys can hit me up in the questions, what technology do you prefer to use? So right now we're in a Zoom environment. Do you prefer Teams, WebEx, Google Meet, Adobe Connect? Is there other technology that you use? Hit me up in the questions. What do you try and use? Any preferences? Okay, I got a Zoom. Got prefer Zoom, prefer Zoom. Zoom seems to be coming in here pretty strong. I'll tell you from my experience, I do prefer Zoom as well. Hence why we're using this technology today. But it does tend to, thanks for that, everyone, that it does tend to be video first technology. So again, we talked about the importance of camera on, and this is a video first technology. I've found technologies like Adobe Connect tend to be more content forward technologies. So if it's really important to show the content opposed to the instructor, the person that you're trying to engage with in the class for that matter, then you can use an Adobe Connect, but definitely prefer video forward technologies like Zoom, and also Zoom is relatively easy to utilize. So thanks for that. Okay, so a couple things in terms of setting up the environment. Now, of course, this is important for the instructor themselves to have good lighting, but it's also important for the audience as well, because we're in this virtual environment, not just for learning, but for a lot of our meetings, discussions. So it's super important that you have a properly lit area to communicate, where you're not having light coming in from the window over here and it's casting you know, this side of my face is all light, this side of my face is in shadows. You don't want that. So you want to have a well-lit room. Obviously, the room should be quiet. You want to have good bandwidth. Here, I'm suggesting a minimum of 40 megabits per second. We're going to talk about sort of what best practices is in sort of rock star situations. So here we've got some tools that we might use to add to our equipment. So whether that's the microphone, so we want to have our handy dandy mic, but then also we want to potentially be using earbuds or a headset with a boomed mic on it as well. This is the same thing that newscasters, on whether they be on radio or TV, are utilizing to prevent feedback from coming in. So super, super important. Here we have an image of a gentleman who's doing a podcast. He's got his headset on, he's got his professional microphone. So definitely a good setup, but I know this person is a podcaster and they're not on camera doing video. How do I know that? Is we see this bright spot, this light washing out right behind the gentleman's head, where it looks like the light is reflecting off of some glass. Okay, that would be less than an ideal setup for a video forward environment. Okay, so a couple of pro tips here. We can look at this expert's setup, where she's got the camera. The camera is positioned in the middle of a light ring, super important. So the light is coming at her face, illuminating her face. You can see she's got her gamer mic as well, and her setup on her laptop. Here's another example of a different type of camera, the one I happen to be using now, which I do like. This is what my setup looks like. So I'm using a multi-monitor setup, using a separate webcam, and then of course using the microphone and then the headset, so we don't get feedback on the audio. So sort of some of the sort of nuances to that. So we talked about the LED lights, having a microphone. 100 megabits per second is sort of ideal. Hardline connection, can't emphasize that enough. Super important to have that hardline connection. Oh, come on. Oops. Okay, so that hardline connection is something that really makes a big difference. And of course, I can't draw on that, but fair enough. I have a high-low desk as well, so if I want to stand up to engage with my audience, just as if I was in a live classroom walking around, not walking around, but again, have the ability to stand and engage with the audience. And then having a staged background where I have a home office set up as my staged background. Some people prefer the digital backgrounds, but I found sort of best practices is sort of having that homey environment or business environment that you want to create, whatever sort of persona you're trying to portray. But then also sometimes you have those staged props that Bill was talking about, and those things can be a conversation piece and a way to identify with your audience, and they say, "Oh, that's kind of cool. I didn't realize you were a sailor," or, "Oh, I see of artwork on various cities. What city are you in?" Well, Statue of Liberty happens to be my city, but okay, all right. So let's do one quick thing. I'm going to do a quick poll in terms of how long should a day of instructor-led virtual training. So what is the ideal time frame, amount of content that we want to have in a virtual training environment? So I'm going to launch that poll. So please give me your responses. Okay, the poll should be open. You should be seeing the poll. So how long should a day of virtual training be? Should it be 2 hours? Should it be 5.5 hours? Some time frame in between. Again, now this is the context is we're doing this for a full day. Okay, answers are coming in. Great, great, great. Give it a few more seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And share results. Okay, so we've got the two most popular responses being 4.5 hours and 5.5 hours. And then we've got a couple folks with 2 hours and 3 hours, or 3.5 hours. What we tend to find is that the best practice tends to be 4.5 hours. How do we break that down? We break that down into 3 90-minute sprints. So we call a day of training in a virtual environment, 3 90-minute sprints with obviously appropriate breaks and lunch breaks in between. So that would be sort of our recommendation for a day of training in a virtual environment. So I'm going to stop sharing that. Okay, great. So want to leave us with a couple thoughts on blending both the e-learning and instructor-led training together. And basically the idea is that our suggestion would be that we can take some foundational elements and put those foundational elements into e-learning. Now, as Lauren mentioned, that our L&D dollars are always stretched. We always want to do or accomplish more training than perhaps budgets allow. Well, blending the live learning with the asynchronous e-learning really does allow us to stretch our training dollar, and we're able to take more foundational things, put them in the e-learning, and then really reserve that time with the instructor to basically build off of the asynchronous content, not repeat it, super important. And we can also cover more advanced topics, complicated nuances of the topic area, but then also super important where we're going to have applied sessions. So when we're working with the live instructor, we should be applying techniques, applying skills, practicing what we've learned in the e-learning environment. So there is some opportunity to engage and interact and refine those skills and develop those skills, whether that create muscle memory or learning new additional concepts. We're coming into time here, so I want to just kind of leave us with a few parting thoughts. So before we start, again, get fired up, be ready to go, smile. Smile, be happy, have your water, your beverage, whatever you need. Be ready to be on stage for at least 90 minutes. Again, that's our preferred time for a sprint is 90 minutes. Again, 3 90-minute sprints to make up a day of online learning, or I should say synchronous learning. Use your voice, intonation, cadence, create emphasis, Again, cameras on, best practice. Remove extraneous files, disable pop-up notifications, have your assets ready and loaded and ready to go, and then watch the clock. So hopefully we're coming in right at time here, 11:59 on the East Coast. Any questions? We'll just open it up to any last questions. Otherwise, we want to thank you for your participation and being here today. We will be circulating the slide deck, so you'll have the access to that, the links associated with it. We'll also give you a link to the recording of the session and contact information to the extent you have interest in additional information. So everyone, again, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Yeah,
Have a great
have a
day.
great rest of the day. We're just going to check the Q&A. Anything coming in? All right, I think we're good. Okay. All right, I think that's a wrap. So Marta, let's stop the recording.